Good Shabbos, everyone. It's been another challenging week here in Houston, our region, and throughout the country. So I thought I would start tonight with some good news, some really good news. The historic peace agreement brokered by the United States between Israel and the United Arab Emirates. The UAE and Israel signed a U.S.-brokered agreement just a few weeks ago that has become known as the Abraham Accord, implying that the three parties represented the three religions of Abraham: Islam, Judaism, and Christianity. And next week, high-ranking administration officials from the United States and Israel will fly to Abu Dhabi to advance normalization on the first commercial flight ever between the two countries. I thank those in the Trump administration for their tireless work in helping to make this happen. Job well done. I believe all of us, no matter who we plan on voting for this November, should recognize our president and his team for making something happen that has significantly helped Israel. I also thank Democratic nominee Vice President Joe Biden for his unequivocal support of this agreement. You know it's a good development when both sides of the political aisle agree, especially today. But there are sides who aren't happy about this peace agreement. First, that first group that is devastated by this agreement is what I would call the forces of darkness in the Middle East. They are panicking. One of the most important Arab countries in the world has now made peace with the dreaded Zionist enemy. For these forces of gloom, anything that challenges the isolation of the Jewish state is a disaster. As we've all seen since 1948, in order for so many of these regimes to survive, Israel must remain the irredeemable sinner and the evil oppressor of the Palestinians. And this sinister view of the Jewish state has long been the enduring and too long narrative that sustains the dictators of the region, keeping attention away from their own corruption, incompetence, and oppression of their own people. The problem is that in the long run, any model based on lies and manufactured hatred isn't sustainable. At some point, people will know better. At some point, people will strive for a better future. And this opens them up to other truths, especially in our day and age of social media. As writer David Suissa recently pointed out, the UAE, in making this historic deal to establish full diplomatic relations with Israel, woke up. In fact, its leaders woke up a while ago. The difference is now they're coming out. They're not hiding it. They're telling the world and the people of the region, Israel isn't the enemy. Israel doesn't want to invade us. Israel has a lot to offer in terms of technology, cybersecurity, and defense of the entire region against Iran. This is an earthquake, a call to Israel's Arab neighbors to look to the future rather than the past. It's no surprise then that the leaders of Iran, Turkey, Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Palestinian Authority are panicking. These forces are very afraid because the UAE, a monarchy aiming to modernize, has shattered the model of the Palestinian conflict as the key to progress in the Middle East. This brings me to the second group who is also not happy about this agreement: Jewish extremists here in America who like to blame Israel for all the problems in the Middle East. They claim that it's Israel's so-called oppressive treatment of the Palestinians that is the cause for the endless conflict. We have seen more and more of this accusation in recent years with the rise of groups like If Not Now. Young people, many of them fellow Jews, who are so blinded by their hatred for Israel, they fail to see what is really happening in the region. It's hard to blame them sometimes. They were often raised without a full understanding of the nuances of the conflict and a full appreciation for what it means historically to have a modern, democratic Jewish state in one of the most difficult regions in the world. This historic agreement is only the latest development to shatter their naive and harmful views. Just over the last decade, we have seen the Arab Spring, the Arab Winter, the war in Syria, the rise and fall of ISIS, and growing Iranian support for terrorism throughout the region and the world. If these reasons weren't enough for anyone to see that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict had nothing to do with the lack of democracy, freedom, and economic development in the region, maybe this new agreement will make a real difference in waking them up as well. The region can change for the better without peace between Israel and the Palestinians. Yes, there are moderate forces in the region who understand that Israel has tried again and again to make peace with the Palestinians, countless times since the beginning of the state in 1948, yet the Palestinians have again and again rejected those efforts. Now for over 3 years, even refusing to participate in constructive talks to end the conflict. How can Palestinians claim that Israel continues to oppress them if they won't even participate in talks to end the so-called oppression? Moderate forces in the region, like those in the UAE, have finally had enough of the Palestinians' intransience. They will no longer wait for the Palestinians to finally make peace with Israel to create a better Middle East for Jews and Arabs alike. Will those here in America who like to only criticize Israel, will they do the same? Shabbat Shalom.